You are now listening to an episode of Hidden Voices, so sit back, relax, and enjoy our community podcast. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Hidden Voices. I'm your host Samir, and today is the fifth and final group discussion for season 2, which focuses on life. And all our previous episodes are available now on scribershive.com as well as YouTube and SoundCloud. Today we're concluding the subject of life with the topic of purpose. So we'll be looking at different aspects of purpose and discussing morals and ethics as well. Before we get started, I'll get to introducing our co-hosts for today and our guests. With a special guest, we have the two Farahs today. So we have Farah M and Farah D, and as well as Raggo Zulu Rebel with us. So guys, just before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, starting with Farah M?
Hi everyone. I'm really excited to be here for the 5th episode. So we've reached the 5th episode on our season on life. So thank you for everyone who's been listening to the episodes, and we hope that you find this session very helpful. But so a little bit about myself. So you probably heard me say a few times, but I'm the director and co-founder of UPress, which is a social enterprise, and we get to do some really incredible work in the community. And so thank you, Samir.
Moving on to Farah D.
Hi everyone, I'm Farah Dualeh. I am a personal performance coach, and I run a small business that is training and coaching predominantly for women around procrastination, taking action, and I'm really excited to be part of this conversation today.
Amazing, thank you for being here. And finally, on to Raggo Zulu Rebel.
Hey guys, my name is Raggo Zulu Rebel. I'm a hip-hop artist, I'm a father, a workshop facilitator, long list of many other things, and looking forward to getting down to the crux of it today and finding out about purpose.
Thank you all for being here today. We'll get straight into it, I guess, with the simplest sounding question, but I guess the most difficult if you are based on the context on which you ask it, and that is a 3-word question: what is life? And if you had to sum up a way that you lived in one sentence, what would it be? But before you sum it up in one sentence, I just want to get to know what you guys think what life is. What would you define as life?
Okay, I'll start. So I think that you said, what is life? So I think that life is essentially a gift and an opportunity and something that is not always within our control, and therefore a level of curiosity and openness is required to kind of get through life. But I think in terms of what is life, I would say it's just a gift and an opportunity.
Just follow up, I'd say that life is an experience. Life is like it's almost like a game or a simulation or even a program. It's kind of like our divine self here in a flesh to learn things, to experience things, and to have a moment of realization before we return back to our source. So it's kind of like it's a trip or an adventure.
Very interesting, very interesting. And I think for me as well, I agree with you. Definitely, life is a gift, a blessing. And I also think life is very complicated, but it's precious at the same time as well.
Thank you, guys. For me personally, I think, like you said just now, life, it's a very complicated thing to talk about, but people often simplify it whenever you're talking about it in, like, let's say biological, like diagrams and whatnot. So there's different perspective to what makes life what it is. But just on a base level, I guess if we're going to put science into it and stuff like that, it's almost like a timeline of just living things, and how one small thing can develop into growing into something large, and then over time even though it sounds a bit like, whoa, like just decaying over time, and then, like Raggo said, returning to its original source. So I don't know if you guys touched onto this or not, but why do you think life exists? And it could take any perspective you want. Why do you think life exists?
Well, touching on what I was saying earlier about being like a returning to coming from this. Have you guys ever seen there's a Pink Floyd album and it's got a triangle on it, and the light goes into it, pure light goes into it, and then it turns into a rainbow inside it, and then reflects back out as pure light. So life is that experience within that triangle where we come from, that divine source which I mentioned, of the life giver, whatever you want to call it, depending on your spiritual background. But we come into this physical being to as one pure light, and then we get the whole colors of the rainbow. So coming from the whole collected all consciousness, we kind of fragment into parts so we can recognize and experience and kind of see each other. Do you know what I mean? So you can, I don't know how to explain this. It's kind of coming from the whole to being a part of the whole, to recognize what the whole is. Because if you always are the whole, you wouldn't recognize it. Do you know what I mean? So it's a reflective experience to kind of understand our position, and then to get a better understanding, a better perspective on what that position is. For example, if you saw a picture of you had a postcard of the beach, if you've never seen it, as much as it looks good, you could have drew the picture, but you've never really experienced it. So you've had that life experience, gone into the triangle, into the fragmented parts of it, kind of yourself, to come back to yourself, to kind of and then figure out what the next experience is, because life is a cycle, so it continues.
Yeah.
It was a bit complicated. Sorry, it was a bit all over the place, my explanation, but I know what I mean.
No, you explained it very well.
Thank you, Farah.
It's quite a deep question to think about, isn't it? Why does life exist? And I guess this kind of links to what we discussed in the fourth episode around spirituality and belief and religion as well. And I guess, depending on, like you said as well, going back to the source that you come from, but also I think from, maybe if I was to put on my spiritual side, I think, life exists for a purpose, and there is a purpose and there's a design to why life is the way it is. And, I think from a spiritual point of view, we know that, this is a test, this is a process that you're going through. This is me speaking from from my faith as a Muslim. So I think it's a very interesting question, but I think it's a very, again, similar to the other questions, a very complicated question to answer. What is life and why does it exist? But I think, there is a purpose and there's a fine design to it. And this is part of my faith and belief as well. I think why it exists. And I think it's a test as well. And in a way, returning back to the source, where we come from. And also, it'd be really interesting to explore. What do you think, Samir, as well? Like, why do you think life exists from your point of view?
From my point of view, I actually share a very similar point of view to you. Life exists because we have a purpose here on Earth, and I think life exists in cycles. So, and every life is unique to each other. I think, even though in studies and stuff like that, people will talk about the similarities of mankind. What you perceive life to be is what your story is, and no one can take that away from you. I think whether you focus on life spiritually or in any other way, I think life is what you want it to be, and that's what I think.
Could I just follow up on what both you guys are saying? Two things.
Yeah.
One, why you said that life is here? Well, from a faith or a spiritual perspective, will, like at the end of the Lord's Prayer, for example, they got "Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done." It's a will. It's even, for example, not on a such a big level as in the whole of creation. I'm a father. Without any will, I wouldn't have had children. My life cycle continued on in that. It starts with a thought. In any spiritual practice or whatever, in the beginning or the early phases, there's a thought concept. Let there be light or whatever. It's a will. It's a desire. Not even a desire, because desire is kind of a bit of carnal, where it feels a bit flesh. But will is kind of more the word. It's a power, And then on the thing of, like you're saying, on the experience while we're here, it's each life being different is kind of like a because you've got a moment of realization, but every experience leads you up to be ready for that moment of realization, so you can contribute that to the fabric of existence, you know, like a mosaic. And each stitches on a badge onto that mosaic. Some people don't, they miss it, they don't necessarily see it, but generally we're all here to figure out what that thing is, so we can get to that moment of realization, to be like, oh, and then it adds to the universal consciousness, which is the all. Do you know what I mean? And then that's when once you've achieved that, often is when you return to your source, because you've done your mission, and then there's another mission for another soul or for another being. You know?
And do you, just to ask you a question, or to follow up on that as well, do you think then a life can exist without purpose, or do you think purpose is necessary for life to exist?
For me, because I'm quite a purpose-driven person, so yeah, I think there's always a purpose, whether or not we recognize it or not. Do you know what I mean? And I guess that moment of realization that I'm referring to is when most of us will see it and be like, oh, it's the penny drop moment. Oh, is that what it was? Oh, kind of thing. I can't guarantee that everyone will. Some people won't, or some people see it and choose not to. Ignorance is bliss. You've seen the Matrix with the guy that's already been out the Matrix, but wants to go back to eat steak and kind of live within the illusion and the Maya. So some people will be wired that way inclined, but I feel that we're all sent with a mission, whether or not we achieve it or not, or whether we choose to fulfill it, is a different thing. But then I guess that sometimes we fulfill our mission and we don't even necessarily know it. Like, for example, there could be, I don't know, you walk out the train station, there's a guy there that's hungry, you pop back to the fabric of life, you can't pass, give him a change or whatever. He may have died of starvation that night, he may have got whatever, but being in the right place at the right time, you serve the continual motion of life, you know? So
that's interesting. And you could be, you know, you could fulfill that purpose or that aspect that, you know, in a way, it's like your path without even realizing, and moving on with the next aspect as well. What do you think, Farah? Farah, to bring in, do you think life can exist without a purpose, or do you think it's something that's required?
I would say it's something that's required. Like Raggo said, I think people can live life, actually, like be alive without knowing their purpose or knowing the purpose. And some people will, you know, live and die that way. And then others will find a purpose that is enough for them to feel like they fulfilled their purpose. But just to go back to what is the purpose of life, I think that's one of the questions that you guys have just answered. For me, I know that it is a complex topic, but for me, there's such simplicity in what I believe. So in terms of coming from a faith aspect, coming from my own faith, which is Islam, and I'm Muslim, for me, such simplicity in knowing that my faith tells me that God said, I have created mankind to worship me. Meaning, and worship me in the sense of the worship, what we think of like prayer, but for me is like the whole of life, living itself is worship. So whether you're working out, whether you're helping somebody, whether you're like whatever, parenting, anything that you do whilst breath in you, as long as it's not harming yourself, and it's not harming others, and it's not harming you physically, mentally, whatever way, and like I said, it's not taking or harming others, whether it's one person or societal level, then that won't be worship. But anything other than that is worship, and that is the only purpose that I'm here to do. And for me, there's such peace and simplicity in knowing that I don't need to seek purpose. I've been told, and I believe in that purpose. And then for me, it's very easy for me to live in that purpose by living my life in a way that is healthy for me and healthy for others, i.e. worship in the ways I was describing. So for me, there's such simplicity and such joy in believing that and understanding that to be my purpose. And for me, it's what somebody was getting at earlier, where all of us will think that our purpose is different. So we're not all obviously going to think the same. And nor will we all have the opportunity to even find a certain understanding of what purpose is for us. But for me, I feel like as mankind, and not just mankind, but like just everything, the universe, everything that exists solely for that. And then, like you've all said, and then you return back to the one who already created you. So for me, it's in a weird way, it's a really simple way for me to think like that.
Just to contribute, following up on what you were saying about back to your faith, and there's a word which is, as a Rasta, we got a word called liberty, which means kind of more or less what you were saying about how you live. It's not just, okay, I do this one day of the week and then I kind of put it down and continue doing what I'm doing. It's about how you conduct yourself, how you relate to each other, how you see yourself, how you treat each other. I'm just going to read something real quick from Wiki. It's their kind of explanation of what liberty is, but it kind of sums up a lot of things that you said from a different perspective, but still kind of similar. So it said, liberty is the Rastafarian concept of righteous ever living. The essence of the realization that energy or life force conferred by the Almighty, which we refer to as Jah, or God in brackets, exists within, flows through all people and living things. This energy is the presence of Jah living within us and is often expressed within the Rastafari vocabulary as I and I, where the first I refers to the Almighty, the higher self, the highest, and the second I for oneself, the physical flesh being, the man. A primary goal of Rastafari meditation is maintaining awareness of I and I, so the balance of yourself in the flesh, but the higher purpose, like you're mentioning, your connection to the source. A primary goal in the Rastafari's life is to expand on his or her liberty. The philosophy of liberty can be enhanced by intense prayer, meditation, ITIL diet, perhaps most importantly. So ITIL is where you strip off the V and it comes to what's necessary to life. That's in food, but that's also in the way you deal with people. So, for example, something that would confer over, which isn't necessarily our thing, but ITIL, for example, is in Islam, where you guys don't necessarily deal with insurance, or you guys don't necessarily deal with these things that would be haram because they're not conducive to your lifestyle. Because if you deal with insurance, that means you don't trust your peers and siblings when a bad experience would happen to cover you. Do you know what I mean? So where you're living in that communal experience, you know that we're going to cover each other because you're dealing with what we would refer to as I and I, your brother, your sister, your neighbor, your family, your friend. The community will take care of each other. So rather than having to...
Sorry, and just to add to that, and a better example is interest. Just in what you were saying, it's interest. Yeah, it's interest because you have to, for interest to work, it has to be exploiting certain people, and so the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, essentially, and that's what you're trying to kind of balance out and stop.
Because why would you, if your brother's in need, Farah's in need. Farah's house got hit by a lightning. House got hit by a lightning bolt. Me and Farah have been brothers for 5 years. He says, bro, can you turn around and lend me a little change to get some dinner for the family tonight, or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, but I need a point on it every day. You need to give me an extra pound interest. That's not very brotherly, is it? My brother's in need, and I'm going to capitalize on the minute when he's in. But the only way our people can see these things is because they're in tune with their purpose. They recognize my purpose isn't here to capitalize off my brothers or to be the richest. If that's my due, what is for me will come to me. My purpose is here, like I mentioned earlier with the homeless man and giving him a sandwich or a change, is to serve each other, is to take care of each other, is to be there as a representative of that higher power in the flesh and to do those works. So if I'm thinking about me, as opposed to even like the use of the word I and I, there is no you or me. It's I. So the same way as I treat myself is the same way as I treat you. Or forget about myself. I treat I, same as I would treat I. Everyone is the first person concept. So it's kind of the similar on that. Do you know what I mean? It's two different ends of the spectrum, but it's still a very similar concept. But because it's coming from the same place of knowing your purpose, knowing the reason why you're here, you know?
100%.
Right, since you guys have delved into it a little bit, we're going to move on to the next question and talk about your philosophical views in a bit of detail. We want to know what your philosophical views are, whether or not like you have your own set that doesn't follow like any typical like figures like Confucius or Socrates or any of those other historical figures. I just want to know what your philosophical views are in life. We'll start with Farah.
So for me, I guess I don't really have philosophical views in a sense, but I guess in a way that what guides my purpose and I guess a way of life is my faith. So like, similar to what Farah said earlier as well, I think a large part of it is influence and also a sense of direction and I have my own purpose. I have my own personal goals and ambitions and so forth. But philosophy, like, and also my viewpoint is guided by my faith and my belief, and my spiritual connection to God as well. So in a way, I guess it's influenced by that aspect and also my own experiences as well. But yeah, I guess it'd be really good to hear from Raggo and Farah D as well, to hear their perspective as well, and if this is influenced by their faith and their purpose.
Do you want to go first, Faraday?
Yeah.
I don't mind. I think I'm similar to you, Farah M. That I don't think I necessarily have a strong philosophical view of my own necessarily, or that at least I've taken the time to kind of give it energy to kind of discover it, or that I deem it to be really important. So maybe I do, but not that I know. But for me, the only thing that I could think of is that, yeah, definitely it's governed by my faith. Like I said, everything from sleep to everything is governed by this purpose that I believe in. But I think for me, maybe the only thing I can add is that for me, it's about dancing between destiny, which I believe in like completely, and free will. So I believe in that, and I believe in both of them. And I think it's knowing your purpose and then knowing that both those things are constantly at play. Your destiny, what was written for you, as well as you having the free will to kind of change things and be responsible for things and influence things. So that's the only thing that maybe I can add. But beyond that, I don't actually have a strong view on that.
Just following up on what you said, Faraday. So see, before I mentioned about Liberty, I have a project, because I'm a musician, called Liberty, but I also have a project called Maktub, and that kind of refers, I believe that word refers to what you're talking about, destiny. Is that correct? About it being written? Is that, am I off?
Yes, destiny, exactly. So it's pre-written destiny, basically what's written for you already, kind of thing.
And like I said, even like pre-written, it's in creation. Do you know what I mean? It's in the stars, it's in the universe, it's set. Do you know what I mean? Like it's put in motion, and we're just kind of playing our role as character. But like you said, you still have to make those decisions and choices. So it's like having it all in one hand, but then having it all in the other hand, and you have to make the two hands mesh to work. Because if you go too much to one way, you get off balance, and if you go too much the other way, so you have to continually maintain that balance. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I echo exactly what I believe as well.
On the thing of philosophy, I'm a thinker, so I spend a lot of time thinking and kind of, but similar to what you guys said, but slightly different. Like, my Rastafari identity or my culture is my foundation of my thinking. But before I was a Rasta, I took my trod at about 17. At 17, you already have an idea who you are and the kind of things and the personality, and you've been through your formative years. So this is the basis of what I operate from, but then I build my ideologies or my thoughts or on it, because I could sit down with 5 different Rastas and have a different outlook or way of seeing things to them. Do you know what I mean? I could reason with them, and I'm not necessarily going to argue, but I might not see it exactly the same, because I think often, not think for myself, but kind of, I'm not necessarily going to be told, you're this or that. Do you know what I mean? I have to, 2 and 2 must always make 4, if you understand what I'm saying. So, yeah, I just build from what I see on an everyday basis, because things happen. Things happen that will mold you and grow you and turn your perspective. And I'm not just going to hold on to any one thing when the truth is still coming to me and revolving. And, so I use this as my foundation, as my rock. Have you guys ever seen Inception, the movie?
Yes, I've seen it.
So you see, he's got the little tangible physical thing that he keeps in his hand to remind him of what level is actual reality. That's what my spiritual concept is. It's that thing, that tangible thing which I can touch in my pocket to give me grounding. No matter, I can go to the moon, I can go to space, I can go to Mexico, I can go wherever, and I've got this in my pocket to keep me grounded, but I can still go these places. You know what I mean? But I just operate how I operate, but from the place of I'm grounded. You know what I mean? I can always wake up out the dream because I have that to come back to as a root or as a core. It's almost like a track finder. You know what I mean? Your car goes missing, press the button, back to source.
Amazing. For me personally, in terms of the philosophical views that I hold, they're varying in terms of what makes my identity. So in terms of like culture and heritage. So obviously I was born a Muslim. So in terms of philosophy. There's a little bit of the hadith, the words, teachings of Muhammad, as well as the Quran. But then in terms of like heritage, I have a little bit of Mongol heritage. So there's a little bit of Tengrism when talking about philosophy, as well as Taoism as well.
What's Tengrism?
Tengrism is a ancient Mongol religion that the early Mongols used to follow. I'm still learning about it, but there's a few there's a few aspects of it that are a little bit interesting. So my approach to philosophy, and like I previously mentioned in the spirituality and belief episode, is to keep an open mind and to learn from other religions as well. So to teach, but also be open to be taught about other things. So yeah, so there's elements of different things. So there's Sunnism, Tengrism, Taoism, Sufism, as well as like a mixture of different Western and in general Eastern philosophies that make up the my philosophical identity. Yeah.
What you was just saying there, Samir, is kind of exactly what I was saying of, whereas I have my base foundation, this is who I am. But see, for example, you mentioned Tengrism. I've never heard it. I'm a curious person. So some people, due to their belief or due to their knowledge or due to their cultural identity or how they see themselves, I might be curious, but I don't want to go there. I'm never going to look there because I feel like I'm cheating on my... I don't feel that because I'm a full cup. So this is the basis. The bottom of the cup is this, but we can fill it and refill it. And then sometimes these things will give you more perspective on the thing that you're already dealing with. For example, like you could... I don't know, you've been using a spoon your whole life and then you get a fork. Do you know what I mean? Or you get a knife. You're not going to throw away the spoon just because you've now got a knife or a fork, but it opens up the way that you now eat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So...
Yeah. That cup analogy really reminds me of Bruce Lee, because he uses that cup analogy as well. To
be like the water.
Be like water, my friend. Yeah. That was something that really like caught on to me, because his beliefs were Taoism as well. And so, yeah, he believed in, well, the fluidity of how you take on life. And so when he says, if you pour water in the cup, it becomes the cup. It just means being able to adapt to the situation, but also imagine yourself being the water and then turning into the shape of that cup to be able to understand the purpose of that cup itself, I guess, is to contain the water. I don't know. It's
empathy, man. You know?
Empathy, yeah, of course.
And we have our senses to feel. So if we're not really, like, a lot of the time we're not necessarily using them. You've got that where you can turn around and tap in and become that, and because it's all part of the one, it's all part of the whole.
Yeah.
So you can tap into that information that cup there has, vice versa. But where we're so trapped up in ego or self-identify, this is who I am. I am this person that was born on this day by these parents or this culture or this identity, and I'm not shifting for a minute. It makes you rigid, and then it limits your experience, and it might limit you actually achieving the purpose that you're here for. Might even change it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
There could be a person that you're meant to meet, which will give you the keys to that next step, but because you're holding very tightly onto, you know, and I'm not saying to go out in the world and just become everybody, because you have to know yourself, you have to know what's good for you, and you have to know limits and boundaries. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we're not here on our own. Do you know what I mean? We're all here for a reason and you meet people for a reason. Like we were saying earlier with Matthew, it's written, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I just mentioned Bruce Lee just now. I just wanted to know whether you guys have a specific philosophical figure that you look up to, or take any ideas from.
Well, Marcus Garvey is a big leader for us. He's our prophet. He told us as black people that a king would come in the east and look for the crowning of a king. And from when His Majesty sat on the crown, it represented a redemptive era for us as a people. But a lot of other things he's got, even, for example, looking to Africa, looking back to our culture. At that time, it was shunned on. He's looked at as jungle bunnies and monkeys and derogative things. Do you know what I mean? So seeing ourselves in such a high esteem, you guys know me. I'm confident. I believe in myself. I've got a lot of self-confidence, and it comes from having that kind of strong figures in my childhood. Do you know what I mean? That was unapologetic to be who they were. and he gathered. He had in the 1920s where certain people couldn't even get a job, or certain people couldn't even use the same tap as some people. He went from where he was in the Caribbean all the way to America and started one of the biggest African black movements, the UNIA, which had more than how many members were the UNIA? Millions, basically. Hundreds of thousands, touching on the millions in all over the world, kind of thing. So that level of organizing, centralizing, it wasn't all roses, it wasn't all easy when you look into his actual personal life, but a lot of that kind of gives me the drive, direction, and back to the core thing of looking to Africa. That doesn't necessarily mean, because he had a speech, Africa for the Africans, Ireland for the Irish, Palestine for the Palestinians. It's to go back to whoever you are, to your roots, to your grassroots, to your culture, to your heritage, to where you come from, to find out what's for you. Do you know what I mean? Because, for example, like my grandma, she would use a lot of herbs and roots, for example. You get sick, then boil up lemon and ginger. Do you know what I mean? Little simple things which are normal to some of us, but to some people it's a strange thing. But these little things, whereas now a lot of us have gone over to what is now Western medicine, where we go and get a paracetamol, we go see the doctor, drugs, etc. But then a lot of our mortality rates and things like this are a lot lower because we've diverted away from our culture. So it's just little things like that which remind me, as that little thing in my pocket, as a symbol to know who I am. Don't forget where I come from. Don't forget my roots. Teach it to my children. Make sure it's something that's important to them. Have respect for other people's roots. Learn about other people's roots. Find common ground to build on. Just little things like that.
Amazing. Farah, do you have any philosophical figures that you look up to as well?
Not outside of. So I think the without feeling like I'm just pounding on the same answer every time. It kind of always goes back to my first answer, and so for me, any sort of guiding support that I need comes from my faith, and it comes from everything that's included. So whether it's the Quran, whether it's the Hadith, whether it's the Sunnah, the way of the living of the Prophet, or all of them. So for me, it just comes down to that again. It's pretty much the same answer that I said before, but outside of that, not really.
Faraday, so you said it's not to sound like you're pounding on the same thing, but all rivers return back to the sea. So all that just shows is, and I think maybe the reason why you might feel a bit that way is because people are so inconsistent in this time. So everyone's a bit flighty and all over the place. So when you are consistent, or when you do stick to the same script, when you don't deviate, you might not feel a bit like, but because everyone else is so kind of all over the gap. Yeah, fickle. Because people are so fickle in this modern time, social media and all these other things. But that's how, to me, that's how it's meant to be. As I mentioned before earlier, we come from this source, we go into the pyramid, we come back out to where we went to. All rivers go back to the sea. So I think that's a beautiful thing, personally. That's my view.
Thank you. That's such a good point, actually. Yeah, you're right, actually, because even with my views, wherever it is, sometimes because it does feel so grounded in what I believe to be the truth, and because I love your analogy about holding on that you return back to. When you were saying that, it made a lot of sense, because that's exactly how I feel. I think there's growth to do, there's learning to do, there's development to do, but it essentially always comes back to the same thing for me. And yeah, so thank you for clarifying what I was thinking in my mind, and thank you for kind of putting it into words for me.
As we were saying about the light, we're all just reflections of each other and this experience that we're having now. So like, we wouldn't value pink if you never had a purple, or if you never had a red. You wouldn't value green if you never had a yellow. So we're all just reflecting, red and yellow and pink and green. We're all just reflecting back to each other, and that's how the engagement and the sharing and platforms like this kind of just help us to kind of get to know ourselves more through
Absolutely.
And on that note as well, like getting to know ourselves a bit more, and also like linking to what you said, all water leads back to the river. Do you, like, this is a question for both of you, and actually for everyone, is do you know what your purpose is, and if so, what it is, and if we don't, like, do you want to find out, and what process are you going through? So it's quite an open question there for everyone. So yeah,
yes.
Do you know to recap? So I guess, do you know what your purpose is, and if so, what is it? And if you don't, what, is that something that you want to find out? And if you are finding out, what are you doing to find out what your purpose is? Quite
Yeah,
double, yeah, it's like 3 questions in one. Sorry about that.
no, it's fine, it's fine. I know. I think the only reason I hesitated is if I did hear correctly, I think we kind of did answer that. So I think that's the answer that I keep going back to, is that my purpose is so clear. It's to be here to worship, but like we said, worship fully, meaning everything that we do, eat, breathe, how we communicate, everything that we do for the environment, just everything that is the opposite of harming, cost to yourself and others. And so your life's been given as a gift in order to worship, so that it benefits you and others for the time that we're here and beyond, and then you return. And for me, all I'm here to do then is submit to that, agree to that, if that's right for me, and then live every day in everything that I do with that knowledge, and not deviating from that knowledge, and understanding that knowledge, whilst Raghu was saying that before, whilst open to learning and development and seeking knowledge that is not just from your faith or understanding, just from where you are, because I think there's beauty in finding things more and developing, and kind of just seeing where life takes you. But for me, it's just grounded in the fact that I don't have to go through on a long journey. There's many people in this world who are pained, and they are pained because they will tell you, I don't know what my purpose is. And they don't even just mean spiritually, they just mean just in general, from work to life, just they don't understand what the point of this life is. And therefore, then certain people will go towards certain activities to numb out the pain of not knowing who they are and what they're here to do. But for me, I am so grateful, and I see this life as a gift, because I didn't have to go on that journey. For me, it's like I was told and it made sense. And then I adopted it, it made more sense. And now I'm just trying to live my life in a way that is in line with that just makes me and others happy, and happy in the sense of not happy like you're not always going to enjoy, you're not, it doesn't mean happy, it just means that you always know who you are and you always know what is happening with life.
I think that content. So happiness is kind of like, hey, I'm happy, but content is just to be at peace with.
At peace.
Yeah.
The word's peace. I think from it, because you could be sick, you could not have something in your life, you could be getting a divorce, you could be anything that we deem to be a negative could be happening to you, but I don't see it as a negative. I think everything that happens in this world, whether we think it's bad or good, is for you, is designed for you, in order to bring goodness and greatness and gratitude out of you. And that can only be done sometimes when you understand what your purpose is. So you understand what those things are for. You understand what the purpose of those things were.
When you know who you are, you're going to know your
life
portion
fully. And so, sorry?
No, go on, sorry.
No, perfect. Yeah.
I was just saying that when you know who you are, you know your portion. So when you arrive, you're not going to run from it or hide from it. Do you know what I mean? But where a lot of people are unaware of who they are, oftentimes their portion comes in because it doesn't look pretty or because it doesn't have a bow on it. They're like, oh, and they run from it and then continue like Jonah in the well belly. You end up continue running and running from it, and then in worse scenarios that put you back in the same place where you was meant to be to begin with. For example, like we as Ras call it a trod. Muslims, you guys will call it on your deen. Buddhists would say on the path. Do you know what I mean? But it's walking that journey and maintaining it and not deviating from it. Because when you deviate, sooner or later, you're going to end back on it because that's where you're meant to be. Do you know what I mean? You mentioned pain before. And I think a lot of time where we live in where mankind is right about now, where we live in quite a comfort on demand place. If you look at the timeline of humanity over the years, like right about now, everything is a lot more about comfort. And so we run and avoid pain, but we've got our senses to tell us about our experience here. You can hear, smell, see, feel, etc. That's to let you know you're alive. And like, for example, when the doctor hits you on the knee and your leg lifts up, or when something happens and you say, "Oh, pinch me, so I know I'm alive." It's pain that reminds you that you're still here in this physical flesh experience. You know, it's our senses that that's how we perceive this experience, and so this is what we're using to know which way you're going or like you said about being happy, for example, oftentimes if you don't feel happy, oh, this is terrible, this is the end of the world. Something little changes, and all of a sudden it's the world's greatest thing, you know. And back to people being fickle. What you were saying about purpose, the original question, I think when I've broke it down to the most basic level, my purpose here is to raise the vibration. Like life is a frequency. You've got low frequency energies like jealousy, hate, greed, envy, whatever. You've got high frequency energies like love, peace, consideration, empathy, etc. The higher you go, that's why I call it the most highest, to be in that closer to that. Do you know what I mean? So my thing here is to raise that vibration from any, and also to get it started. I've noticed that for a long time, I was trying to raise this vibration. For example, speak life. So some people would say basic things like, good morning. A good morning is when something's died, but didn't you just wake up alive? So a grand rising would be a better. So even down to little things, down to the spells that we cast with the words that we say, everything in my thing is just about, I come in the room, I try to, if I'm communicating with someone, I try to give them my full attention. Where a lot of people will kind of just hear what they want, or little things like that, you get a better receptive energy, and then the energy flows better between ones and ones. Honesty, when you can't trust a person, the energy dips. Do you know what I mean? So little things like that to try have. Obviously, sometimes to be honest is harsh. The truth isn't always nice. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you confront people with that breath. Bro, your breath smell it, man. Like, or you could have something on your chin, and a friend's gonna say, bro, you got a bit of breakfast on your chin. Someone else that's not necessarily a friend is gonna let you walk around the whole day with it on your chin and embarrass you. But so it's bringing the elements that raise that vibration higher, and it's also to get things started. Because often everyone's there, you've got all the elements, but no one's willing to kind of take that first step. So oftentimes I've noticed from my characteristic more than anything is that when everyone else is kind of sitting around and procrastinating and scratching their nose, feel a bit shy, my job is to kind of, hey guys, let's do this. Hey, high five, and lower people's inhibitions so that we can raise our true vibrations and bring our true self to the table. So I feel in a lot of my exchanges, I don't know, I've worked with you guys for a while, you might agree, you might disagree, but I feel that's a big part of my purpose, to get things started and to keep it going up in the right direction.
Very interesting. I think both of you have different purposes and different goals and experiences as well. And I think it'd be really, actually, I'm curious to know, like, had you always known this is the purpose that you want to pursue? Like, for example, Farah, did you always know, like, the choices and everything that you make will be linked to your faith spiritually, and that will make it easy for your journey? And the same thing for you, Raggo, as well. It'd be interesting to know, like, had you always known this, or is this something that you realized, and what did you go through to come to that realization? This is what you want to do, and this is your purpose. So it'd be interesting to hear both your perspective as well, Samir. Like, yeah, also to hear your viewpoints as well. Do you have a purpose?
Samir, what's a purpose, Samir?
For me, personally, in terms of religious purpose, yes, I know. In terms of spirituality and stuff like that, that's been ingrained into me since childhood. But in terms of life in general, I think in order to really find your purpose, you just need to live your life as it is and let the days unfold. That way, you could be able to see a clearer path. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That way, the path gets a little bit clearer as you're walking up. So let's say if you're on like a dark road, like pitch black, or a dark tunnel. So you keep on walking, and then you gradually see the light at the end of the tunnel. And so that's how I see purpose in life, other than religiously. So in general, just to let life unfold as it is. But obviously, there's different aspects where you have to take control. But there's some which you don't have any control of whatsoever. So you just have to let that happen and be ready to adapt and overcome. So yeah. What do you guys think? Should we move on to the scenario questions?
Yeah, I think we should move on, definitely.
Yeah. All right.
That's okay with others.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to talk more about morals and ethics. So we're going to be talking about one moral dilemma that's been famous for the last few decades. It's the trolley problem. This is something that I've seen a few parents use as well on their children, on younger generations, but using toys as a way to explain that moral dilemma. So let's explain the trolley problem. So there are 5 people tied on a rail track, and a train is going to run over them. You have an option to divert the train to only hit one person who is also tied to the rail track. Will you divert the train towards the one person, or do nothing and let 5 people die?
Say that again. 5 people tied to a train track. The train's coming.
So there's 2 different train tracks.
Okay.
So on one train track, there's 5 people tied to the track.
Yeah.
And on the other train track, there's 1 person tied to the track. So would you divert the train to the 1 person on the track, or keep on going to the 5 people on the track?
That's hard.
It is. This is the thing about...
Like, instinctively, I thought, yeah, save the 5. But then, before, the train was already going to kill the 5. It hadn't done anything. Me diverting it now, I've killed that person. As much as I might not have done anything before, and it would have been bad, but me actually taking that action, I have killed that person. The train was already going to hit the other 5. Do you know what I mean? So instinctively, I thought, yeah, save the 5. That was my sense in numbers, innit? Like, I just thought, wow, 5 over 1. But then, as I saw in my mind my hand touching the rail, I thought, oh, I'm going to kill this guy. Like, I am actually going to kill this guy by pulling this. Like, it's not just an accident that's happened now.
Mm-hmm.
I've kind of contributed an action towards this person's death. I don't know. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Farah?
Yeah, so I know this is a famous question, but I hate it. Like, it's one of those questions that every time I see it, I'm like, I don't even want to like deal with it. But since we do have to discuss it, yeah, I'm very much of a similar mindset to you, Raggu. So for me, I have to think, for me, morally, I think that I physically did something that then killed that one person would do more harm to me, which I know is very selfish because you have to look at it from a societal level as well. But for me, in order to sleep, if I leave it as it was, then it kind of goes back to maybe telling myself that that it's outside of my control, that it wasn't me. Like, why would these people tied up already? It was this train supposed to hit them? There's, their creator. There's like, basically, I throw it back out there, and I just tell myself that I physically didn't do anything to harm 1 or 5. All I did was not do anything. So I know there's no right or wrong answer in this at the end of the day, but for me, yeah, I think it's just leave it alone and let the 5 people die.
All right.
And it's from a selfish point of view. It's literally how could I sleep?
Farah's trying to sleep. She's trying to get in that.
I'm just thinking my mental health, which one's going to do less damage to me? So, because there's no right or wrong at the end of the day. I mean, I know, like you said, it's a numbers game, so you could argue, yes, the 5, that's the right thing to do, but I don't think that we're talking about like the moral of you, like morally, like deep down what you think is right or wrong. So for me, just leaving it alone and letting it be is probably the safest bet.
Because the thing is, you could save the 5 and they could be 5 of the worst tyrants the world's ever seen.
Yeah, because I want to know why they're tied up to begin with. I want to know what's happening.
It could be 5 of your kids versus your mum. Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you just it all context always means a lot, but
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a tough one, man. I guess instinctively I probably already pulled it on the 5, but then like you said, I'm never going to sleep again. So I don't know. I don't know. And then by now the train's already come and run everyone over. So like,
yeah, definitely. Yeah. What about me?
Yeah.
I'd just probably leave it alone. Same option that Farah had. Personally, like you said before, yeah, this type of moral dilemma is quite problematic, especially for me to answer. I don't know, like it's very weird, isn't it? It's a very weird thing to talk about. But the purpose of the moral dilemma is to talk about the different aspects of utilitarianism and the I don't know what subtle word is, but yeah. But what I think is a better like moral dilemma problem to talk about is something that I've discovered actually in a video game called The Last of Us. It's basically just a video game about like the zombie apocalypse and like basically mass like most of the population has been wiped out due to this apocalypse. And there's this one old guy who finds a young person who potentially has a cure. But in order to make the vaccine, that young person has to die. So what option do you take? Do you kill the young person in order to get the vaccine? Or
There's an old saying, and I think it
Yeah.
might have been an Islamic saying, but to save one is to save mankind. Is this one where it fits?
I don't know.
I don't know. I
But
don't
yeah,
think I don't know.
but yeah, in that, but yeah,
I
in
don't
that,
know.
yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's
How old is young?
huh?
Are they over 16? Are they over 18?
They're like 14 years old.
Ah,
This young girl named is 14 years old.
Oh God, give her a name and everything. Oh God.
Mm.
Yeah, her name's Ellie.
Oh God.
Yeah,
And that's
but
even
we do
worse, because you know what Ellie means?
what?
It's like divine or God. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, wow.
Ellie. Oh yeah, like Eli. Yeah.
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 So it's like,
Yeah. But yeah, the gamer actually gets to make that choice, and the choice that they make is to save Ellie. And what happens afterwards
Mhm.
is the repercussions that come from saving Ellie. So,
that's quite in line though with like the whole Christian crucifixion concept though.
yeah, of course.
That's more or less the same thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sacrifice the one sacrificial lamb, the innocent, the pure. Do you know what I mean? And then I'm not even gonna get in the rabbit hole because that would get.
Yeah.
There's other things going on in the world. Are you right? You're right. There's other things going on in the world right the same, but that's often it. It's the blood of innocence that saves them all. Right? When you check wars and all these things and whatever, it's not like if two politicians got in the ring, two countries had a fallout over trade deal or whatever, yeah? England and I don't know, Spain or something, they got in a war.
Yeah.
Boris and the Spanish Prime Minister got to get in the ring, strap up, put gloves on and fisticuffs it out. War over. No problems. But young men go to die for the cause of old.
Mhm.
So this is what happens on a daily basis in our lives where innocent people are sacrificed.
Yeah.
Innocent for the agendas of others.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. In
I think
general,
the only...
yeah.
Sorry, Samir.
No.
I think the only thing to add as well, you know, when you're answering like these like dilemma moral questions, I think it's really hard to say what you would do because do you get what I mean? Like now we're so detached because it's just a scenario, we're just chatting over Skype. But I just think none of us actually know what we would do in that actual situation if it was ever anything similar to this, if that makes sense. I think you just don't know. Like we said, it depends on so many other things, obviously. But I'm saying there's a certain level of detachment that is happening now where it makes it almost impossible to really know what I would do in that situation because it's just fake, essentially. Does that make sense?
I think we're being very honest because most people, when you put these things on them, they would say what you want the other person to. Yeah, I would save them, or I'd kill them, or I'd.
Yeah.
We've just been very kind of honest, like I don't know, like we've just been very kind of honest about it because we're kind of being more. That the conversation's quite truthful, or we're being kind of in a not really from an ego place.
Yeah.
I feel that in other conversations, or maybe in a different group, if we had the same conversation, or maybe even face to face, or in a bigger group, you would probably get a lot more bravado, a lot more ego, a lot more. Do you know what I mean?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, scenario questions are always a difficult thing to bring up, but it's the purpose of it is just to spark conversation, obviously. But we're coming close to the conclusion of this episode.
One second, Samir, before we go, is Farah back? Is Farah there? Yeah.
Yeah, he's back.
Farah,
back. Yeah.
You saving or you slaying?
Am I saving or slaying? Yeah. I think what you all both have said as well, but leaving it as it is. If that people are already on there, I think I'll probably take the same approach as well. And that's an approach I didn't think about, but it's also like that guilt of like knowing that regardless whether it be 5 or 1, that people have died. It's a really difficult situation. And same thing with the little girl as well. Either save humanity or save her life. Again, I would. It's a difficult scenario, and it needs a lot of context. But I would think probably similar to what you said as well. Like it doesn't matter if it's just 1 life or 1,000. It matters at the end of the day. And every life is precious as well. Yeah, exactly. And we Farah said as well at the beginning, life is a gift. So I wouldn't feel comfortable, morally comfortable to take that life away, and I would not be in a position to do so because it's not my position to take someone's life or let alone judge it. So it would go against a lot of ethics and a lot of morality aspects. So it's a difficult question to answer, but I think what you said, Raggo, it needs a lot of context. When
I was 14, I went to the Caribbean for the first time to see my family in Barbados, yeah? And my uncle, he was like, what do you want? You hungry? And I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Instead of things like, what do you want? I said, chicken, because them times I used to eat chicken like it was going out of style. So he's like, all right, cool. So we're just chilling out in the backyard and this chicken's running around and doing its thing and doing whatever it's doing, yeah? And then my uncle's like, you want chicken, yeah? I'm like, all right, yeah. He grabbed it by the neck. One thing, chicken's running around headless, all this kind of thing or whatever. I was about 14. Within about 3 years, I stopped eating chicken. Yeah? Because whereas often if you have to do the dirty work yourself or even witness it, you don't want it. But we want chicken nuggets, but we don't want to chop heads. Do you know what I mean? We want to save mankind. Press the red button. Where's Will Smith? Independence Day. But you don't want to get out there and roll your sleeves up. So I think that's often
the reality. And it's the reality as well. And I think also linking back to the conversation around this episode around purpose. And I think this moral scenario kind of poses the question around like who you are and what kind of life you've lived as well, and the circumstances that you have and what purpose you have as well. So I guess in a way, if you're very pragmatic and very maybe very detached person, you might approach this and say, I'm saving 5 people, therefore I can afford to lose 1 person. It depends. I guess it links to the type of life that you're living and the type of choices that you made as well. So, and also thinking about are you the type of person to moan and complain, or are you the type of person to roll up your sleeve and if you've got a problem you want to solve and come up with a solution. It's interesting. It's a very interesting scenario and an interesting question to ponder on. What do you think, Samir?
Yeah, it is definitely a very interesting question to ponder on. But to wrap up this podcast, no worries. But to wrap up with one last question, what do you think are the different generational approaches to ethics and morality? Me personally, I believe for the most part, the older generation take a more conservative view into not only politics, but different moral dilemmas as well. What do you guys think?
I watched something with my boys yesterday, yeah? And it was a documentary called LA 92, yeah? And it was about the riots in 92, but it was comparing those riots to the riots in 1964 when Martin Luther King got killed, yeah? And then obviously from 92, that's when I was young. 64 is when my mum was young. 92 when I was young, and now my boys are young and seeing this whole George Floyd thing, yeah? But the main difference was cameras, evidence, accountability. A lot of times people will get away with what they can. Do you know what I mean? So now with this generation, there's no privacy because everything is on film. So I'm not saying that they're more moral, but where everything is accounted for, that it was always accounted for. Like there's got a concept called the Akashic Record or your soul or whatever. It's all written. Like you said, whatever you do is accounted for. But where there was no one ever to turn around and say to you, that's wrong, people would get away with blue murder if they could. Do you know what I mean? But now just due to the advent of everyone having some form of recording device to present evidence, it's changed a lot of the ways systematically that we have to operate, not not necessarily myself, because I was around. Well, yeah, NATO, because the person I was at 13 before 1999, when there was CCTV cameras everywhere and camera phones and whatever, to now, I guess that will have that's one. Technology is a big thing that's changed with mankind, is what I'm trying to say. So that may have something to do with the way that we morally operate, whether it's for a case of morals or whether it's for a case of accountability, evidence, police you can't get away with. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Okay. And what about you, Farah? What do you think? Are there different generational approaches to ethics and morality?
Yeah, without doubt, because I think at the end of the day, what is seen to be ethical and what is seen to be morally the right thing to do always depends on the people, the time, the place. And so, what was moral or ethically correct 500 years ago or 3,000 years ago is going to be very different to today. And if we won't be around, but if we think, 500 or 1,000 years into the future, there are things that we do today that we think we're being very ethical, very moral, and they will look back and think that we were barbaric. So for me, I think that it's always evolving and it always depends on the human. So again, that is why for me, having that grounding in faith, in a timeless law of what is moral, what is correct, and what is ethical, for me is the securest way for me to judge what is moral and what is ethical. Because if I just judge it by what is fashionable in that moment, it means that what my grandmother was told, what I'm told, and what my great grandchildren will be told are very, 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 very different. And that's okay. It's okay for it to be different and to be suitable for that environment. Yes, there's an element of that. But I just think if we're just always just making the rules up as we go along as humans and not really knowing what we're doing, I think that's quite dangerous. And I think that it means that there's always more harm done to someone in that way of thinking. So for me, I think there's just a timeless law in what is moral, what is ethical. If it's understood correctly and practiced correctly, I think it can serve everyone in a healthy, safe manner, regardless of the change of time, regardless of the change of the people or the situation. And so for me, I don't think necessarily millennials or younger people are more moral or ethical. I just think they think what they think because of their time, and older people think what they think of their time, and it will just continue to change forever if we just keep doing that, if that makes sense. I hope that made some sort of sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely, it made a lot of sense. And actually,
really quickly before you go, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, you guys got me excited. Would Adam and Eve have ate the apple if there were camera phones?
Probably, because of the destiny thing comes into aspect as well, isn't it? So probably.
While eating the apple.
Yeah. But I do know where you're coming from with the technology. We feel that we're able to get caught more, seen more, and therefore we are. But that means we're still not moral or ethical. It just means we're not doing things in plain sight. We will do it behind closed doors and so forth. So we're still not.
Intention, right. Even if we don't do it, the intention's still there. So it's
yeah. So ethically and morally, you're still bankrupt anyway. If you were still going to do it and you're not doing it now because you're scared of getting caught, it's different, isn't it?
Very interesting. Also, do you remember, Farah, it brings back another aspect as well, just made me think about is, so Farah and I did a similar course called Community Leadership and Law. And do you remember Professor Mensky's kite, Farah?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember it also talks about, so there's this Professor Werner Mensky, he came up with this concept of law being plural and how the law, so in this case, like you look at ethics, morality, and law, and just made me think about, like how law needs to be a bit more plural. So what he discussed is like, he's saying that there's a state law, but then there's a religious law, there's, the custom cultural law as well, and there's also community law that explores it as well. So there's different aspects, and I think what you said as well, Farah, like with regards to the different times and environment and how people evolving. So to give an example right now, how people of ethnicities were seen 20, 30 years ago. It was commonly ethical, more just to segregate people, to label them, compared to now where everyone is very very apologetic, changing the system, trying to change the way people work. I've seen organizations apologize, take stand in terms of racial or discrimination or gender. And before it was ethical and moral to segregate people, but now it's becoming more very disgraced and very immoral aspect of to behave and a moral way to treat people as well. So I definitely agree with Farah what he said as well. As the time goes, 500 years from now, we'll look back and think some of the aspects that we've done now is completely unethical and irrational maybe, and lacks morality. And I think it's for me as well. I think there's a different shift in time and environment, similar to what Farah said. But I think that's something that's constantly going to be evolving. But going back to the fundamental ethics and morality of life, and if you're a spiritual person, you're linking it to your spiritual aspects. So I think yes, it's an interesting topic, and I think, but yeah, Raggo, what do you think as well? You think there's a difference?
Do I think there's a difference from
Generational approach to ethics and morality, over the years?
Yeah, yes and no, because you're gonna have, I guess it's status quo of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like Farah was saying earlier about what's acceptable in the time, like you were saying also what's acceptable in the time, what governs the time. For example, a lot of people 50 years ago were a lot more religious. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Now they govern themselves by other things. So, or what is the status quo? For example, before it'd be religious. Now it's not necessarily religious because everyone may have a different religious thing, but it's about being moral, having morals. Do you know what I mean? Or so it's. I don't know. One thing I wanted to ask you, Farah, is do we need wrong to be right?
Say again?
Do you need wrong to be right? To balance out right. So you need night to day. You wouldn't recognize about day. So do you need wrong?
Yes, I think so.
Can we abolish all wrong tomorrow? Would right still work? Do you know what I mean? Or do we need wrong as the opposite to balance it out?
I think you need both. I think you need both of them to understand the complexity of both. And I think it's the same thing as
to make the choice, like free will.
Yeah, to make the choice. It's just the same thing as we said earlier, life is a gift. But to appreciate life, there's got to be pain as well, and there's got to be death as well, to understand that the process of life, birth, and to really understand the full complexity of life itself, you got to be able to know the different elements to it as well. So yeah, to answer your question, I think there definitely there needs to be understanding of what is good and what is bad, and be able to understand how the two interlink and the type of choices that you make in terms of the life that you want to live and the purpose that you have, and how that links to, if you're a spiritual person, how it links to the bigger aspect and bigger picture. And yeah, so I think, to answer your question, yes, I think you need both.
It's true. And often once you get disciplined, the wrong or the naughty thing it's not even that big of a deal. Do you know what I mean? When you're not disciplined, temptations are massive. Oh my God, they tempted me. Why? Why are you so bad? You're so evil with your temptation. But when you're not, when you're just steadfast in your thing, this is where I'm at, ain't budging for nothing. It's just another thing. It's not so far as to be a polar opposite from right to wrong. These are options on the side of the road. I'm going this way. Do you know what I mean? So,
can I add just one little thing to that?
Yeah.
So your question, Raghu, was, do you need right to be wrong? Or sorry, do you need wrong to be right?
Yeah.
I would argue that no, you don't. I think you can just have right. But we were not designed to be like that, if that makes sense. So for us, in our universe, in what we were designed for, you don't necessarily need both, but both are there. Both are there and they exist for a reason, both of them. So yeah, so you probably do need both. But I think generally speaking, you don't. So for example, from Islamic perspective, you believe in angels, and angels only have right. They don't have free will, they don't have sin, they don't have, tests. Like they all they have is pure, if you know what I mean. All they have is the right way of
except for
doing
Iblis.
things. Well, he was an angel. We don't believe he was an angel.
Oh, okay.
He's a jinn. He's a jinn. He's made from. There's three different things. So there's humans, jinns, and angels.
Are all jinns bad?
No.
Okay.
So jinns are just like humans.
Okay.
That as in good and bad and everything else, and they were both created to worship God. But angels were created without free will, so they only have rights. So that tells me then you don't always need right to be wrong or right to, like you can have just right. But in our law, in the way that we've been created as humans in this life, in like right now, then both of them do exist, if that makes sense. So that's the only little thing I wanted to add.
On a spiritual, back to when we were saying about the triangle, when you're in the source, that's or closer to the source in that angel angle light, that pureness, then there is right or wrong. Don't even, because you're the all, you're tapped in. It's when you come into this physical experience, the right or wrong is important, because that's why we're here to experience that, to feel it, and then to make that decision to go right, so that when you get back to the source, you're like, oh, rare, that was that, or I chose right, basically. Do you know what I mean? That's the test, like Farah said earlier. It's all right, there you go. There's the option. Which one you pick? Do you know what I mean? So,
That's it. I chose right. That's it. That says it all. That absolutely.
Amazing. I think we're coming up to the end of our podcast episode, and we very much enjoyed having Raggo Zulu Rebel with us, as well as Farah Dualeh. Thank you for both of you joining us today. I'm going to pass on to Samir.
Thank you guys for tuning in to the last episode of our second season, focusing on life. Thank you guys for being in this episode. So special thank you to Farah M, Farah D, and Raggo Zulu Rebel. Thank you guys for being here.